What happens when you love food, but a diagnosis means you can no longer eat a lot of your favorite foods? Do you give up your dream of being a food writer, or do you keep going? Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. This is Kristen Donnelly, and I'm here with Molly Stevens. Hey, Molly.
Hello, Kristen.
There's a lot in the world about eating for restrictive diets, but when there's cookbooks related to those restrictive diets, we often assume maybe those recipes aren't providing a ton of pleasure, or for people who just gain so much pleasure from food, we might think, oh, those books are not for me.
Right. Like, I'd only go to that book if I have to, if I'm feeding someone who can't eat certain things, but we don't think of them as full of pleasure, as you say. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tricky, though, because there are people who have diagnoses that mean they can't eat certain things.
Yeah, 100%.
Celiacs, and gluten is obviously the one that comes to mind, which is interesting from a market standpoint because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it wasn't a big space, and it's definitely a growing space, the gluten-free area.
Yeah. So today our guest is somebody who, she was on this path
to becoming a food writer. Yeah.
And she'll tell the story, but she was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and at a certain point figured out that gluten really was off the table.
Yeah.
Then things got even more restrictive for a while. She has used this personal health journey to turn them into books that then help other people with them. So our guest today is Phoebe Lapine. She's the author of 4 books, and her most recent one is called Carbivore, all about eating carbs, slow carbs, as she calls them, not low carb. She also writes an award-winning blog called Feed Me Phoebe. And she has a 52-episode podcast called SIBO Made Simple, along with a book by the same name.
I'm really interested to find out how she's taken her restrictions and yet maintained this love of delicious food and joy around cooking.
Let's go talk to Phoebe. Well, welcome to Everything Cookbooks, Phoebe.
It's so nice to be here. I'm a fan of the pod, and I've been really looking forward to this.
Well, it's great to meet you.
First, take us back a little bit to how you got started.
Oh my gosh. I don't know how far back you want to go, but I guess I'll start post-college since that's when things kind of merged. But I had a corporate job that I was not excited about. It was just, whatever was advertising at the job fair and marketing. I was like, I guess I could do that. On the side, one day, I don't even remember how it came up at this point. My best friend and I from high school were like, we should start a blog about food because we were constantly cooking for friends. And I think that post-college time was just really angsty for a lot of people, but specifically around food. A lot of people, didn't really have that stepping stone to adulthood in college because we had the dining halls, and that was just such an easy social place to gather. And I was in New York City, and we were all living in these tiny apartments and working, entry-level jobs on a limited salary with no time and really no skill for the most part. My best friend and I were kind of the few that had a little bit of skill because I had always been interested in food, and we actually cooked a lot together in high school growing up. And so we kind of started this blog on a whim. I got the .blogspot URL.
Right.
This was back in the dinosaur ages of blogging. And then I hate when women say this, but we did get quite lucky and got a book deal 9 months in, which is a little unheard of. Her entry-level job was in publishing, so she knew what a proposal looked like. And I think just because we had hit on something with our niche of, we called ourselves the quarter life cooks, and it was, again, the kind of small space, multiple contingency cooking and a lot of stories. At the time, blogging was really about voice more so than anything else. Of course, the recipes, but, visuals were definitely low on the list. And I think, we had, again, just really kind of found a nice little pocket of the internet. And so we had some agents approach us, then got this book deal.
A cookbook deal.
It was a weird cookbook. It's a lot of narrative in there. And it's not organized in a traditional way at all, which I think, I don't know, I guess that's kind of the way I do things. is just the weird way. But that was kind of, the jumping off point. And I say that after that, I got into doing just a lot of odd food jobs, whatever would pay the bills, since I quit my corporate job and decided to pursue this new career in food. And then my health, unfortunately, threw a wrench in all of my, I don't think they were best laid plans, but in any sort of plans I had.
You talk about how when you got that first cookbook deal, you decided to just go freelance.
Yeah.
Take a huge leap, which it's a big leap.
It was a huge leap. And yeah, it was not like what we got for our book deal was going to be something to live off of.
We're rich now.
Yeah, especially split two ways.
Yeah.
But I think it was just, I was young enough. I had parents who lived nearby, so I knew I could kind of fall back. I moved back in with my parents periodically, I think, until like I was 28, and they're like, you gotta stop.
But with the first book and the decision to create a freelance life, were you thinking, I want to do more books, this is it?
I don't know. I mean, I think the cookbook was honestly the goal when we started the blog. I think maybe that was the first seed of the idea, like, oh, we should write a cookbook together. And then, not that at the time it was like all about platform. I don't think even people used that term platform, but I think it was like blog. Like, that's a good way to kind of write at what we want to do. And it was. I mean, it was a great way to find our niche. I don't think that we necessarily thought we were going to like build a quote unquote platform and get noticed and get this book deal. I think it was more about kind of having a way to creatively go back and forth and I guess like figure out our style and what we were doing.
And what year was this?
This was 2008 when we started the blog. And then we got our book deal in 2009 and it came out in 2011.
Yeah. So that is very fast.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, you worked at these odd jobs, like you were caterer / private chef.
Catering, private chefing. I don't know. We did a little food style. Like, we just kind of did whatever jobs we could find.
Recipe development.
Exactly. I did some work for you, Kristen.
Yes.
And then eventually, once I knew what I was doing, I taught private cooking classes in New York, which was actually the most fun of all the odd food jobs, I think.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But then, yes, health. Throw a wrench.
Oh, yeah. That was like my parallel narrative that just like kind of dovetailed with all the food stuff. So I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called Hashimoto's thyroiditis when I was 22. So before the book had come out, I think like right around when I was quitting my day job, I didn't really feel, I don't know, any symptoms that I could put my finger on. I didn't know what an autoimmune disease was. I didn't know what a thyroid was. My doctor didn't quite explain it to me, just said like, you should go on medication for the rest of your life. And I was, again, super mature 22-year-old. So I was like, la, 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 and then went off to live my life and do nothing about it. But I think all those odd food jobs eventually caught up with me because especially in New York, it's really grueling work. I mean, there's a lot of schlepping. I mean, anyone who knows who spends the majority of their day in the kitchen, it's physical no matter what. But I think I really burnt myself out working a lot of long nights and whatnot. Eventually, I woke up one day with all of these like truly horrible symptoms, like terrible insomnia, but I was like tired all the time. My hair was falling out. I had to like stop exercising because I couldn't like get down the block without, doubling over with cramps. My skin was a mess, which was actually pretty much the impetus to do anything about it because, I always think vanity always wins.
Right. I could soldier through the rest of this, but...
Exactly. I was like, I'm tough. I can, yeah. But yeah, the vanity got me to take a pause. And eventually I saw kind of a more holistic doctor and did an elimination diet and discovered, unfortunately, that gluten and I do not get along. And I tell you all this because this was on like the eve of that first book publishing. And I woke up and could no longer eat any of the recipes in it and was like,
right.
Yeah.
Because this first book is a general cookbook about, there's nothing specialized about the food.
No. And it's a lot of like childhood comfort foods and things that we grew up eating that we wanted to, create our own quarter life spin on. So yeah, I had to make like 400 cookies for our book party and I couldn't eat any of them. I know it sounds trite, but it was very painful.
No, Phoebe, Kristen and I were talking about this. I think for many individuals, realizing that you had all these restrictions that you had to put on yourself as an eater, you may have chosen a different way to go.
Yeah.
Like, okay, maybe cookbooks are not my future.
Yeah, and I think I had a lot of big dreams and big goals, and I think it was actually fairly crushing because I was like, I can't do any of these things if I'm not an omnivore. And even though special diets, especially gluten-free, have become more mainstream, I mean, it's still true to this day. Like, there are no gluten-free cooks on the Food Network. Like, it's really hard to, I don't know, to get your foot in the door. And even as a recipe developer, I mean, I was definitely gluten-free when I did a bunch of work for Kristen at Food and Wine, but I think I had to, I don't know what I did behind the scenes. I might have made some gluten-y recipes and just like taken one bite or outsourced the bite. I don't know. That's bad form, but
outsource the bite.
Maybe not. I honestly can't remember.
I think we actually did keep them gluten-free, but
my memory is you did gluten-free recipes that weren't necessarily like
advertised as such. Yeah.
Exactly. Like things that use rice noodles naturally, for example.
But I think I had jobs come my way and I was just like, I can't do them. And that's just so hard, you know, especially cobbling together anything as a freelancer to have to say no.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Ugh. After that, your second book is The Wellness Project. How did that come about? It's not a cookbook.
No, it's not a cookbook. I mean, it came about from all of this angst and really just trying to figure out what was worth my time, money, and energy. Because I felt like I was coming at the question of wellness and health from a similar place that I was coming at learning to cook or learning to entertain for friends on a budget or whatnot. Like, I didn't feel like I could identify with a lot of the voices on the internet and a lot of the doctors that were, you know, telling me to throw the entire contents of my apartment out and like replace them all with organic cotton and baking soda. So I had to kind of figure out my own happy medium. And I think it's still kind of a problem to this day is like there's kind of Western conventional medicine that's just like, here's a pill. And then there's this holistic side that is just so overwhelming that makes it seem like you have to do this laundry list of things just to get to an equilibrium. And I just had a hunch that that was not necessarily true and that you could pick and choose and kind of find your own wellness adventure. And then also like so many of the minutia that we get lost in, like the single ingredients, the single supplements or whatnot, were not truly the answer or the silver bullet that a lot of people promised. So that's kind of how I came about to the idea of writing the book. I was inspired, which may be obvious from the title, by Gretchen Rubin's The Happiness Project. I was like, let me just get a little type A on this and create a sort of curriculum for myself. I think, again, I started off as a blogger in the dark ages of blogging. And at the time that I was doing stuff around the Wellness Project, it was 2013, I think. So there was still kind of the idea of the yearly project that was appealing to a lot of people who read blogs. So I just started it as a series on my site. And every month I kind of focused on a different problem area or a different kind of corner of wellness. So anything from hydration to gut health to obviously diet, but sleep, stress, kind of every little facet. And I tried on one or two things for size to see A, how they made me feel, and then B, whether or not they were sustainable. And I think that was really where I felt like my voice could differ from the crowd. And in that I really wanted to see what was worth it in the balance of both physical improvement, but then also the other aspects of wellness that people seem to forget about, like social wellness, financial wellness, and emotional wellness. Because I really do think that, you know, if we're stressing about what we're eating and what we're doing all the time, it doesn't really matter how quote unquote perfect we are in terms of what we're doing. It's just not going to have a net positive.
Well, the Wellness Project then is a second blog.
Oh yeah. So after my diagnosis and going gluten-free, I went off on my own and I started my blog, Feed Me Phoebe, which is still my blog to this day. And so, yeah, I started the series on there.
And then this Wellness Project is like a real-time journey.
It was.
Like, we're going to follow you. And then that So it's a page on your website.
I think it's still there somewhere.
That turns into a book.
Yeah, and I was writing the proposal kind of in tandem. I love writing books. I loved the first experience, and I think I'm a long form person, which is, harder and harder to do in a sustainable way. But I always have been, and I just love sinking my teeth into a big project. So yeah, I think when I had the idea for the series, if I'm being honest, was simultaneously like, I would like to write a book about that, even though I haven't done it yet, but I would like to write a book about it.
I feel like you had a Facebook group as well.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that because I was saying to Molly, like, sometimes people think like, oh, I've got to keep this idea very secret. Can't tell anybody. But meanwhile, you're like bringing people in really early.
Well, honestly, I think that's what publishers wanted to see. I think platform was very much a word that was used back in 2012 or 13. And so I was making a huge pivot at the time, whether or not it was seen that way from the outside world. I certainly felt like I was making a huge pivot because I hadn't written anything but recipes basically until that point. I was not a voice in the health space. Sure, I did like gluten-free, but I think even my recipes, I wasn't fully leaning into that. I wasn't like becoming a gluten-free blogger. It was just, I had recipes, as we mentioned, that just happened to be gluten-free. And I don't think I had publicly even talked about my autoimmune disease or anything like that. So yeah, it was like the Field of Dreams model. If you build it, then maybe you'll get a book deal. I don't know.
Yeah. But your health journey doesn't end there.
Oh, no. It's never a dull moment. Right. Just keeps going.
The Wellness Project happens. The book comes out. And that book is more memoir prescriptive than cookbook, really.
Yeah, it's a memoir for sure. It's like 350 pages and kind of more like the traditional food memoirs. I have a recipe at the end of each chapter, 2 recipes. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it's all prose for the most part. It was definitely an intellectual challenge. It was like probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I really had a lot of imposter syndrome. And again, yeah, I didn't really have the platform for it. I was just trying to make it happen, but I had no relationships with doctors or anyone from, I guess, the medical side of things. And I just did a lot of obsessive research and did a bunch of interviews and kind of created these relationships just, on the basis of the project, the quote unquote project. Yeah. Then when it came out, I think I felt very bare because I really put, my family and my relationship with my now husband at the forefront of it. I crafted, like a real narrative arc to these experiments that culminated in my 30th birthday. But I'm really proud of it now. I wish I was more proud of it, from the starting gate. But I do think it's a really good book. I've gotten so much great feedback from people who are newly diagnosed with something or just, again, having that kind of angst about what to do next, how to even put one foot in front of the other when facing a health challenge. And I do think that the book gives people kind of a really simple overview of a lot of the common sense things that you don't see in health books. Because again, everyone's usually selling a silver bullet that can help people create their own toolkit.
I mean, you have research from medical professionals, but a lot of it was also like you and trying things out and writing your real experience.
Yes.
I feel like I remember you talking about dry brushing. And you were like,
yeah, that's not for by me. The wayside. It wasn't for me either.
So yeah, Molly said your health journey was not over. Probably never will be.
Never
over,
will be. I think I'm in a good place now, but there's always a curveball. But yeah, after that, so the book launched. I was quite stressed during that process, and lo and behold, kind of the aftermath, I started to have a lot of weird gut symptoms, and I was doing all the things I thought I should be doing per my research for the Wellness Project. And I was kind of just becoming more and more bloated and more miserable. And that's when I was diagnosed with a new fun thing called SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That's said to be kind of one of the biggest contributors to the diagnosis IBS, which is just kind of a blanket diagnosis for a lot of people with, bloating and GI issues.
Gut issues, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I really fell down the rabbit hole, as I'm one to do, if you haven't noticed by now, on researching that. And there just wasn't a ton out there. And there were a lot lot of practitioners who were super specialized and who were teaching courses and doing seminars and working with people remotely. But even, mainstream GI doctors were not well versed in SIBO. And so I never feel like I'm truly on like the first wave of anything, but I was like, oh, like there is nothing out there that is truly helpful for this diagnosis. And I'm going to take my food expertise and I'm going to create some really good recipes for this like totally dreary diet, which is the low FODMAP diet. Again, becoming a little bit more well-known and mainstream. I started a podcast, so I had a platform to interview medical professionals. And that kind of became actually the basis for a lot of my research because it's an ongoing thing on the research side. A lot of it's just like clinical observation and data from people's very specialized practices. And there's still a lot kind of in the works that's being validated. But, people needed answers immediately. I needed answers immediately. So I just took it upon myself. Again, I guess I write books when I see that there's just something out there that's not like it. And I don't know, I guess maybe it was that 2 years of corporate marketing that helped me after all.
So you get the diagnosis, you're like, oh, okay, now SIBO is part of my life, but you start a podcast about it. I'm assuming you start writing about it on your blog, Feed Me Phoebe.
Yeah, I think that came a little bit, well, I guess, I was publishing the podcast, so I was kind of, publishing those transcripts.
So you start building this platform around a SIBO diet, SIBO recipes, with the intention of there's a book out there at the end of it.
Oh, while writing a proposal, obviously.
Okay. Yeah. So you're essentially researching in public.
A little bit. Yeah. It's not the way I would recommend most people go about things. But again, it's like my ultimate goal with all of these things. What I saw missing from the marketplace was not people talking about it online, but like having a physical book to turn to.
I mean, the Wellness Project was that too. Mm-hmm. You were sharing, your real-time research. And so there's similar.
I guess why wouldn't you recommend it? It's like so much work.
Well, with the Wellness Project, I had to start writing in real time before I was done with the book, like working on the book as well. I don't know. With SIBO, it worked a little bit more seamlessly because, again, the podcast kind of became a main research vehicle. And, the recipe side of things was different than that. So working on that part for the proposal, I don't know, was kind of like a mix of things. And then I was able to just sit down and write it. I don't know. With the Wellness Project, I think I think it was just mostly my book deadline came too close to the finish line of the actual project. And I didn't have enough time to digest my experience again in real time, not on the page, and to like experience a little aftermath and what have you.
Got it. Yeah. To me, it actually seems very smart, like a smart way to use your time. Like create this podcast.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're getting these interviews that you might be doing for your book done anyway.
Yeah. I just collapsed a lot of the steps into overlapping parts of a year instead of letting them play out naturally.
Got it.
SIBO Made Simple is the name of the first SIBO book.
Yes. Exactly. And it's a search term book. So it is, of course, my best-selling book.
Is it your best-selling book?
Yes. And it continues to sell and have a life of its own. And it came out during the pandemic. So thank goodness for that, because I did not that I was going to really go on like a tour for that one, but I didn't have the opportunity to really do any events. I was just, hiding behind my laptop like everyone else.
Right. So say more about what that means, a search term book.
Yeah. So I wouldn't have like necessarily gone into it thinking that. Again, my mission is always about, writing something that doesn't exist, or I guess doesn't exist to the quality that I would hold myself to. But yeah, I mean, as you know, the majority of books are bought online these days at one particular large retailer. And a lot of people are just searching for particular subject matter or topics. And then books come up. And that's how people shop these days for the most part. Unless you, of course, have a huge platform and that search is for your name or for your book. I've been lucky. And again, I think it's partially because there weren't a ton of SIBO books out there. There were a few, and one of them was published by Amazon, probably because they saw the search terms popping up before I did and were like, well, we should do a book on that. But I think mine was more of the medical side and strategies in addition to the cooking side. So yeah, the first think it's like the first 100 pages of that book is all information. And then the back half is 90 recipes. It's a big book.
A lot of people don't even know what SIBO is, right?
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily like marketing to everybody, but as soon as somebody gets a diagnosis or has somebody in their life with diagnosis, they're going right to Google or Amazon to find what's there, and you're coming up, and that's pretty cool.
Exactly. So yeah, that's a search term book. But I mean, a lot of single subject books, I think these days are considered search term books, whether it's, like quick meals or a certain specialty diet or whatnot. I mean, probably, I don't know how I come up for the low FODMAP diet, but that was certainly should be part of the search for my book. But yeah, it's funny because I have gone through, as many people have, like battles with the publisher on titles and whatnot. And there was a huge argument for, not huge argument, like it wasn't, there wasn't that dramatic, but the Wellness Project,
a few emails,
yeah, a few carefully worded emails. The marketing team, I think, on the Wellness Project or sales, or I can't remember who it was, they really wanted to put thyroid or Hashimoto's in the subtitle. And I was like, this is like much more of a broad memoir that can help anyone. I was going more mass with it. And I'll say now, I think they were probably right. I would have sold way more copies had I just sandwiched that into the subtitle. And yeah, maybe it wouldn't have been like the artistic choice or representative completely of what was inside. But that book, would have had had a longer life if I had done that. And even, SIBO, I probably should have like sandwiched low FODMAP into the subtitle too, just to have it there. And yeah, it's funny. I'm faced with this issue on my latest book as well.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. First of all, congratulations on your latest book, Carbivore.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. It's just come out. But you're having sort of the opposite issue with it.
I am.
And even when Kristen was working on, we were working on the outline, anytime we wrote Carbivore, it would want to autocorrect for carnivore.
Yep.
So is that unexpected? I mean,
I didn't think it through. I love the title. I think it's super catchy. And again, this book, I was hoping to go mass again. I was hoping for it to appeal to a wide number of people. I didn't think of it as a search term book. I thought of it as just like a beautiful hardcover cookbook.
And the title's true to the content.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very much, yeah.
Absolutely. And the concept, for those who don't know, is just healthy carb recipes, how to make carbs part of a balanced diet, how to stop fearing carbs since they have become a bit divisive in the last 10 years. And then a lot of the information, I don't have quite as much front matter as I did for SIBO, but there's still like a good 50 pages that does include research on blood sugar and various strategies that can keep carbs on the table without them, causing chaos in the body for those of us who are particularly sensitive or have insulin issues or whatnot. But the recipes are really just kind of plant forward, balanced meals that anyone should enjoy. I had some like early feedback from someone who got sent a copy that they were going to recommend it to all of their low carb friends. And I was like, oh, it's not a low carb cookbook. But that was kind of part of the conversation around titling, is that I have this concept. I say it's not low carb, it's slow carb, which builds off of a lot of the strategies and the science-backed advice that I give at the beginning. It's like really about how to make your carbs work harder for you. And so I think because slow includes low from a search term perspective, my editor was like, we got to put that in the subtitle. We ended up putting it in a burst that then got replaced by a quote from Ina Garten, as it should, on the cover. But again, I don't know. It's like, I've yet to see, we're so new into the publishing process. I haven't seen like where this book will go yet, but already I'm like, it's so much easier to be launching and marketing a search term book. Like, it's so much less heavy lifting. And should I have listened to people and just, I don't know, titled it something different? I'm ultimately, super happy with this book. And I feel like I didn't have a cookbook that really represented my philosophy, my macro philosophy with food. So this was definitely going to be more of that.
Hey, it's Andrew Nguyen. Are you enjoying this episode of Everything Cookbooks? I sure hope you are. But to be honest, it takes money to make every single show, and we need your help to keep the lights on. To pitch in, head on over to everythingcookbooks.com/support. There you'll see a range of options. If there's an insider event scheduled, sign on up to learn more about the cookbook publishing world. Order books through our affiliate page. We've got merch too, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and writing caps. Or just buy us a round of coffee. You can also leave us a review. Help us out however you can. Molly, Kristen, Kate, and I value every single bit of support. Thanks so much for your kindness.
Something with your work, Phoebe, is that your recipes are always really delicious and
Thank you.
appealing and easy. Like they're very oriented toward home cooks. I remember even at Food and Wine when you would develop recipes and we always tested stuff that people even developed at home. And it was always like, oh, Phoebe's food's so good. And there's always like one little thing that's unexpected. But then I was just thinking about it, how the Wellness Project, really not many recipes. SIBO Made Simple, so many more restrictions maybe than usual.
Yeah.
So then, Carbivore is a chance to
Exactly.
let your actual food shine.
I know. And I feel like, again, it's like I pigeonholed myself in this food world, but as I described in my origin story, like I really came into this food career as just like a recipe developer who loved to write. And it's funny because I don't have like a massive platform. I think I have a very dedicated group of folks who have followed me over the years and certainly gained kind of like a new quadrant with SIBO. But I would love to have just written a more general cookbook that showcased my style, but I don't think I was really able to do that. I needed to have some sort of hook, but I feel like this book is the closest I've come, obviously, in recent years to just having more of a general Phoebe cookbook.
No, it's just really interesting to witness because it would have been inauthentic to carry forth and write recipes that you couldn't eat, like you would outsource a bite of, right? So you've just
and I think there are people out there who do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and I mean, for various reasons. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting hearing you talk about the front matter of, so SIBO Made Simple, you said was about 100 pages and more. And then this book, I think it's about 50 pages is what you said.
Yeah, I think so.
And in your introduction, you start by saying, before we dive into the fun stuff, meaning the recipes and all this delicious food, how do you decide what to include or leave in to the not fun stuff? And especially if you're writing a second book on a similar topic, is there a tendency as an author to say, well, just go buy my first book and you can read all about this? Or obviously you've learned new things in your ongoing research. So I'm just wondering how you do that if you have a follow-up book.
Yeah. So this was, again, written kind of for a more mass audience. I think I did also see it as the natural progression because SIBO, hopefully for most people, is not something you have for life. It's, maybe a miserable year of your life. But then afterwards, like you have to figure out how to become an omnivore again. And unfortunately, for a lot of people who do the low FODMAP diet and who do deal with gut issues, carbs, I think, do become a real point of confusion and a real pain point. And then also with Hashimoto's, there's this super restrictive diet, the autoimmune paleo diet. Just search term that. And you'll see a lot of cookbooks come up. But I think a lot of people in the autoimmune space are also really confused around carbs. Autoimmune paleo is totally grain-free per the paleo part, but you also take out all nightshades. Like it's really restrictive. You're not eating potatoes, rice, and pasta, that's for sure. So I wanted to kind of appeal to those folks. And then also, again, the larger audience of people who have just become a little bit fearful of carbs because of the wellness zeitgeist and the conversations that have been swirling. I think actually the idea for the book came about during the pandemic because I felt like a lot of my more diet-oriented, like health-aware friends finally started eating bread again and pasta and realizing that like their world didn't collapse. It's okay. So I didn't start working on the proposal way back in 2020 or 2021, but it was the seed of the idea there, which was like, oh, okay. Now we've figured out like how to be a little bit more comfortable with carbs. Like how can we continue that conversation and welcome them back into a healthy meal.
You include a lot of research about eating carbs and the effects on blood sugar.
Yes. So I'd say my last book didn't cover metabolic health as much as, again, this like kind of acute issue. And treating SIBO, this will get a little nerdy for a second, just bear with me, is kind of the opposite advice that you'll get to quote unquote support your general gut health. So this book is kind of marrying a little bit of that, but it's more talking about kind of those general gut health rules and marrying them with the rules of metabolic health. Because again, as I've seen kind of the trend be with health books is that everyone takes a very siloed approach. Like there are some books out there that have become really popular just about managing your glucose levels and flattening that curve. But in those books, like you don't actually talk a whole lot about gut health. It's kind of this myopic view of like flatten the glucose curves. But in reality, like our health obviously is super synergistic and our gut health is hugely predictive of our metabolic health. So I think my superpower is in helping people manage those questions that often have conflicting advice and don't have a straight line answer, which again, if you kind of look at your body's processes from a wider angle, there's never really a straight line for anything.
Yeah, so it's like synthesizing
so
much.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty good at synthesizing hard to understand information and making it a little bit more palatable and digestible.
Yeah, I mean, you make the science very understandable.
Great.
In your presentation. I mean, I think we want to ask you a little bit about voice, but you use a lot of analogy and clever comparisons and like the container store organizer for glucose, or you reference Vanessa Williams in one. And I'm just wondering, do you develop this type of language as a way to help yourself understand complex science, or as a way to teach others, or both? Probably
both. And I think a lot of doctors are not great at dumbing it down. And then I think that some people that really are writing for like pop science in a mass market, since I'm a super nerd, will read a sentence. I can't think of an example off the top of my head. And it's so simplified that you're like, but why or how? Yeah. And I've seen, honestly, that get people into trouble or become a little dangerous because a lot of things get watered down in the interpretation. And then you're like, well, what do you mean by like helps my gut health? Like that is so broad. Like what in particular? Like what is the mechanism? Or balancing your hormones? Like what is the mechanism of what's actually happening? And I think it's important to drill down just one more level again, so you can suss out your own choices. And that's always like, I feel like my philosophy that I developed in the Wellness Project, which is something I call healthy hedonism, kind of where the things that nourish our body meet the things that feed our soul. That's been like my driving factor through SIBO even, and then certainly with this book. And I feel like pleasure has become like a dirty word in the health space. And I think because I'm a chef and food lover first and foremost, like it's always been something that I want to remind people of and say, read through this whole 50 pages of strategies and then truly pick and choose what's right for you. Because there is no, one size fits all solution for gut health, for metabolic health, for anything. And then most importantly, like think about what brings you actual pleasure, and don't freak out about those choices. I talk a lot about sugar in the book, and there are dessert recipes in the book. And it's not about like eliminating all sugar. It's recognizing kind of the impact that added sugar has on us. And for me, one of my biggest things is mindless sugar, the sugar that's hiding in our foods that we don't know is there, that's driving cravings. And kind of, I don't know, it's like if we just eliminate the things that aren't giving us any conscious pleasure, it would create so much more room, both emotionally and physically, for the things that really feel like treats that we really want, but feel like we can't have.
How are you fact checking a lot of your, like the science parts of the book?
You always got to find the original study and see what it actually says, because people do water it down and take the kind of like flashy sales point. And in reality, a lot of the studies are not that definitive. So I always try and go there. And I'm to be honest, like not the best reader of studies. Like it is not my superpower to like really drill down on the data. Like I'm not the Emily Oster of food science. But I think, yeah, that's a really helpful way to kind of wade through some of the headlines and to get into the actual mechanisms. And sometimes I don't like fully understand, and I'll phone a friend who actually has some sort of credential or science background, and we'll chat about it. But with this book, a lot of it is, I mean, I won't say it's common sense, but it's just understanding the way that our macronutrients work in the body. And then there are some, there's a limited number of studies that have really been done about some of the advice, like food sequencing and things like that. And then there are some things that I just, went out on a limb and I was like, listen, like this is not data backed, but if I'm using my common sense with what I know about gut health and what I know about blood sugar metabolism, this probably is a good idea.
I'm thinking about your recipes and similar question about your research, but I think in the Inside Out Egg Noodles, you talk about a lot of your best recipes come from a failed idea.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, like where you find your recipe inspiration, but also, how the recipe development process might differ for you because you got restrictions. Do you modify a recipe that maybe you remember from back when you were an omnivore? Or?
Yeah. So the SIBO recipes were actually, despite the restrictions, really easy for me because I took a lot of formulas that have worked for me over the years, a lot of favorite recipes. I mean, I cook from the SIBO book all the time. I just add onion and garlic to all the recipes. But for me, it was a lot of taking kind of these tried and true recipes that had been in my arsenal for a long time, maybe some favorites from my blog, and just making them low FODMAP with a few different tweaks. The big one for most people is removing garlic and onion, which is for the most part in every single normal recipe you'll find. And I really discovered when doing the diet for myself that you don't need them. You can create a lot of flavor with your spice palette and just with caramelizing other vegetables like bell pepper, carrots. Yeah, so that was my recipe process a little bit for that book. And then I also kind of enjoyed the cookie cutter element of it. I don't mind restriction. So I really just looked at, the list of what you can have and figured out ways. Low FODMAP's a really weird diet. It's not like a black and white thing. There's a lot of vegetables and ingredients that you can have like a little bit of. And that actually really suits my cooking style because I like to have as much diversity, especially plant diversity on the plate as possible. So just giving people recipes where like that math equation of like a third of a cup of this and that has been figured out for you, I think is really empowering. And I think a lot of people read that book and were like, oh, wow, like I can actually eat so much more than I thought I could. And with Carbivore, with the development process, I mean, it was a much harder book for me because, again, the restrictions were not really, I felt like the sky was the limit. I love carbs so much. I feel like I always take a lot of influence from popular global dishes and kind of put a little bit of my plant spin on them. But yeah, for me, it's a lot about adding something in the book that I call carb companions. But if we're just talking everyday speak, it's like adding some vegetables, adding some nuts, seeds, anything with kind of fat, fiber, and protein to your carbs and making a more balanced dish that way. But for me, it's always about maintaining kind of the original comfort food notes of the dish. There's a recipe that isn't in Carbivore, but there's a version of it, like a colcannon is an iconic Carbivore approved dish because it's mashed potatoes, but there are vegetables in it, especially with the cabbage version, which I have a recipe for in Carbivore. You don't even notice that the cabbage is there. It like completely melts away in the potatoes. And I have a version with kale or spinach that's in the SIBO book as well. And I feel like you don't really need as much butter, weirdly, because you're not making that just like traditional, like really super creamy, smooth mashed potato. It's more of like a coarse smash than a smooth mashed potato. Anyway, so that's just one example. But I created a massive list for this book of like kind of wish list dishes. And then it's not organized by course, it's organized by carbs. So oats, rice, grains, potatoes, pasta. Let's see if I can manage to name them all. Bread, corn, legumes. Yes,
right.
Exactly. So I think I had a spreadsheet for this one because I wanted to make sure that I had the right mix of appetizers, finger food versus soups versus, just weeknight meals, a good mix of, chicken and fish and meat and whatnot.
Desserts.
Yeah, and desserts. I tried to put a dessert in every chapter, but I didn't force myself to. There's none in the potato chapter. Yeah.
You don't want to force that.
Dessert noodles.
Exactly. Yes, there's none in pasta or potato.
Just because you could doesn't mean you should. Right?
Exactly.
I was going to say, when you said carb companions, and then Molly kind of alluded to this, like you use a lot of like pop culture references and just fun turns of phrase. And I feel like as long as I've known you as a writer, it's been that way. And I guess I'm wondering like just how you developed that writing voice.
I'm a huge fan of blogging. I mean, I miss like blogging from the dark ages because it was very voice driven, and I always struggled to find the type of writing, the medium that resonated most with me in college. And it wasn't until I did a creative nonfiction course and my teacher, as our daily homework, we had to send her an email every day, just like it could be 3 sentences, but it was like a journal entry. We had to write something every single day. She called them dailies. I loved this teacher so much. She was super influential. And to be honest, some days I'd like come home from the bar and be like, oh my God, I haven't done my daily, like on my computer. But I think it was so helpful for just getting over yourself. And I think that was honestly, it wasn't that I couldn't find the medium that resonated. I was just so in my head. And so I don't know, just I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself in writing classes in college, and that daily exercise of just flexing the muscle and forcing yourself to write was a huge way of getting over it. And blogging became that for me. And, I'd say I wouldn't say that the writing is like super voice driven or high quality on my site anymore because it's become, again, recipe sites have become much more about the recipe and about answering people's questions and solving for all the contingencies that come about. And frankly, when I'm working on longer projects, that's where I'm pouring more of my creative energy into. But I still think even if it's just more rote food writing, it still exercises the muscle. And I think it would be hard to not develop your voice if you're putting in that kind of time. It'll just come out.
Yeah, I was looking at your blog and I'm like, you're still putting up a post once a week.
I know. Can't quit. That's my day job at this point is the blog.
Is it just so part of your workflow now? Or?
Yeah. I think the goalposts, like everything, just keep moving further and further out. Like you have to do so much more. You have to do video, and then you have to do a reel like to promote it, and a newsletter entry and all of that. And again, write 1,000 more words just with FAQ. But yeah, it's still, the workflow changes again as more things get added. And I think that's why I don't do kind of as many new posts as I used to. Last year I was just kind of doing one a month and writing on, I don't know. But I still love recipe development. So I think that's my outlet for recipe development. I still kind of want to put together a home for my recipe.
The blog.
Yeah. On Instagram, it just, the shelf life is too short.
Well, you mentioned marketing, and we are curious. You did a pre-order bonus for this cookbook.
I did. I've really thrown everything at it.
How did that go?
I think it went okay. I don't know anymore what the metrics are supposed to be, but I did kind of an e-course for SIBO, and I thought that it would work well for this one too, with just some of the tips in the book. So that's kind of, my marketing has been more around the tips and the recipes until I got the physical copy in my hand, which was fairly recently. But yeah, in January, when people are looking to turn over a new leaf, I did a pre-order push then a little early to do a live version of this 2-week course that includes a lot of the metabolic tips from the book. And I think it went pretty well. I mean, compared to SIBO, it was kind of similar number of people that joined. And then, yeah, I've got more traditional kind of bonuses leading up to launch, a live cooking class that I'll do for pre-order folks the day after launch. And then people can still do the course on their own time, just not, live. And there's a Facebook group for that, that anyone can join at any time to chat about, some of the tips or or their experience with them and what's changed. Then, yeah, I've got some swag that I'm giving away, and I think that's all the bonuses.
Yeah, you mentioned short video, right? Short form video, and you've been trying to do a little more of that.
Oh my God. Yes. So amidst all of this, I have a 1-year-old. So last year, as I was doing book edits, I was juggling a few more things than usual. Still am. But I really, that was when the blog and my Instagram and all platforms went a little dark. It's like I did let them go. I let myself go on Instagram. It was glorious. And then I had like a rude awakening trying to get back into it, especially now that, Reels were important a year ago, but now it seems like it's just the only thing to do. And it takes so much more time. It's just all of these things add up. And I'm just, I don't know how people do it full time as an influencer these days, because I'm trying to do like 4 or 5 posts a week just in lead up to launch. And it's like, I do not have time for anything else on my to-do list. And the to-do list is long, as you guys know.
Right. It's when you write a book for a special audience or a specialized audience like the SIBO, I keep thinking about it. All these recipes have that legend at the bottom with the icons, how you could adapt or modify these recipes for other diets. And so is part of that trying to reach out or to be inclusive of a non-SIBO audience, or just be aware of everyone's got on their own journey?
Yeah, I think it's everyone's on their own journey. Yeah. Certainly with SIBO, like the irony is that there is no like data-backed diet for SIBO. There's just a bunch of approaches that different practitioners recommend. The most, well-known of which is low FODMAP, which has kind of had its life before SIBO was a thing as just something for IBS. And so I knew if I was going to bring my followers with me, those who aren't kind of, in the onwards part of their journey, I needed to at least, have a dietary key for that. And I did try and make sure that like half the book could be adapted, but no, it was like very freeing to like cook with asparagus again, and they can just deal with it. But yeah, I think dietary restriction key always will be super important in my work, should I be lucky enough to write another book. And this one, is kind of just the basics. The whole book is gluten-free, but I advertise it as gluten optional because you can, of course, use any type of bread, any type of pasta you want, but all the baked goods and, everything within recipes is designed to be gluten-free. It's how I tested everything. So, it'll be really good if you use regular pasta. Just kidding. But again, maybe I should have put gluten-free in the subtitle, and I do better.
Oh God.
Oh man. Yeah, that really is such an interesting point and something I hadn't thought about before with titling until and how the subtitle, it's like you can be clever in your title, but then your subtitle should be written for search.
Totally. Well, I'm not a good I don't get a gold star necessarily for this book. And it's been really frustrating with the carbivore autocorrecting to carnivore on Amazon, on Google, everywhere.
Plus, that's a diet. That's like a niche but trendy diet.
Yeah. Per that, I think one piece of advice I would give people, and it's something that I don't know that my publisher was necessarily always right on with, is that it's not just about winning these search terms. You have to think about search intent. And it's something I talk about with my back-end team for the blog. I do a lot of SEO. I try and be pretty SEO savvy with my blog. And so I kind of applied that mentality a little bit to thinking through the titling. But so like low carb, carnivore. I'm not going to win by like having this autocorrect to carnivore. No one who's searching carnivore is going to be like, oh, carbivore. Actually, you're right. I think I could just do carbs. And even low carb, I don't know. I've been curious to hear that people who have the book or like, I'm going to recommend it to my low carb friends, because I wouldn't have thought that that would be kind of good search intent for me either. It's more, again, like a more broad, like looking for healthy recipes, looking for healthy comfort food, looking for gluten-free recipes that I think would be a little bit more in line with what the book actually is.
Mm-hmm. It's like you're searching for alcoholic cocktails and NA cocktails come up. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, that sounds good. It's like, no, that's not what you're looking
that's
for.
not
Like,
what
you're
your
not going to make that
intention
switch.
is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can't just cram the search terms in there just to, win impressions. It matters what people would click through and actually want to buy.
Well, thank you so much, Phoebe. So much great info.
Fascinating. Thank you for the time.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me.
After we talked with Phoebe, she mentioned that if you go to carnivorecookbook.com and you enter your order number, that you will get access to all kinds of cool freebies, including a course about eating carbs and managing your blood sugar at the same time. If you order it, which we hope you do, go on over there and get yourself some of the freebies. Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more episodes and ways to contact us, go to our website, everythingcookbooks.com. The show is also available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your audio. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a review. Any book mentioned in the show can be found on our affiliate page at bookshop.org. Thanks, as always, to our editor, Abby Circatella. Until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.